Okay, I'd like to call the Pool Task Force presentation April 13th, 2020 to order at 7 o'clock. First, before we do the Pledge of Allegiance, I just want to say, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance, then I'll do the opening remarks. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So this is the third presentation of information for the Pool Task Force for Edgewood. I just want to say, I hope that everybody out there who's seeing this presentation recognizes the amount of hard work and due diligence that this group has put into this, whether you're for or against a pool, not a pool, the Edgewood. These people have dedicated a tremendous amount of time on this task force to get the information out, get the correct information out so that you can fully understand the implications of doing that. So with that, I will turn this over to Selectman Bertram to give the presentation to start it off.
Thank you, Jeff. Today we have...
is now joining.
Okay, a little bit of a side voice coming in there. The way the meeting today is going to run is Tom Marks will give his presentation. Then we will have a question and answer session involving the entire task force. I'd like to mention that there are 5 new documents that have been posted on the town website. You can go look for those. Ray, if you want to show people where they're located, that'd be great.
Page is southbury-ct.org/Edgewood.
Ray, can you scroll down a little bit and I'll describe the 5 documents. We've got a letter from our Southbury Parks and Rec Director, Michael Ganem, an email from the Ballentine Pool Director, Maria Papiro, an email letter from Lucy Suter, the one of the swim coaches, or the head swim coach, I guess, and a memo from Kevin Bielmeyer, our Economic Development Director. And we've added the presentation for today. You can see that listed there at the bottom is number 18, and number 17 is a list of the questions we're going to try to answer tonight. There will be one more presentation. I'm not sure when. We don't have all the facts together yet to really determine when the date of the final presentation will be. And I'm assuming it'll be a final presentation because that'll be number 4. I think that's sufficient for this. Tonight's meeting we're targeting will end at 9. Maybe it ends sooner. Every time I say a time, it always goes 30 minutes longer. So maybe 9:30 is realistic. I don't know. Hopefully not that long tonight. Participants tonight, we have Jeff Manville, First Selectman, John Michaels, Chair of the Board of Finance, Tom Connor, Vice Chair of the Board of Finance, Charlie Rosa, Chair of the Park and Commission, Tom Marks, a Commissioner from the Strategic Planning Commission, Hugh Sullivan, our architect on this project, Dan Colton, our Finance Director, and myself, George Bertram, as a Selectman. So I guess at this point, Tom, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, George. And thank you everyone tuning in. This is our 3rd presentation. So whether you've been with us from the beginning or this is your first time tuning in, we appreciate your interest in this topic. I appreciate Jeff's kind words up at the top. There has been a tremendous amount of work done to understand the situation as best as we possibly can understand it. And we're going to try to make as much of that information clear and available to you this evening. As George hinted, we are doing something a little different tonight. The first 2 meetings, we presented the same slide deck, which kind of gave the basic information. There were 5 buckets that we were looking at that really were the evidence the task force was considering in its recommendation of purchasing the Edgewood complex. Tonight, we're doing something different. We're going to assume that you've had a chance to either catch one of those presentations or review that document. We're not going to go through it a third time during our time together this evening. Instead, we've received well over, at this point, 200 comments and questions through the website that Ray had shared earlier, southbury-ct.org/Edgewood. And we're leaving that comment section open, so please continue to share your feedback, your thoughts, your questions. But we thought tonight, rather than us, evidence that we've come across to the point, that we would let those comments and those questions. And so there's a couple of areas, as George suggested, that we're going to cover. The first is we want to touch on a few areas where we received feedback and it was within our scope to advocate and include that feedback into the work that we've done. So we want to make sure you know that these pieces of feedback have been heard, we were able to act on them, and here's how we put them into action. Secondly, there's a lot of misinformation that surrounds this topic, and we want to clarify some of the more common pieces of misinformation that have come through those feedback channels. Finally, we'll end with discussing some important updates, things that might have changed since we last had a chance to present to everybody. And then we'll open it up. George will cover some additional questions that aren't going to be covered in this slide presentation. So you can go ahead, Ray, to the next slide. So the first piece of feedback that we on the task force have heard loud and clear, and I believe the first selectmen of this town have heard loud and clear, is the fact that the people want their voices to be heard and they want to have a referendum. And we touched on this last meeting, but I'm going to clarify it again because we continue to see comments and questions come in. And if I could ask my colleagues on the call to mute their microphones because I am picking up some background noise. Thank you. So I'd like to explain one more time. This is a slide from the last presentation, but I'll explain again the three groups at work here and the role of each group. Starting with the ad hoc task force. Our assignment when we were formed was to determine if Edgewood was an appropriate option to replace the current town pool, and does the financial impact justify the purchase? Our recommendation and our answer to that question is going to be submitted on April 16th as a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance on whether or not to move forward with exercising the option. John, if you're on the call, I'll then pass it to you to explain the Board of Finance's role when we have the joint meeting of Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen on April 20th. John, I think your microphone is muted. Can you unmute your microphone? Okay. I will, or Tom Connor, maybe you could take that question since John is on the
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so in the meeting next Monday, a kind of Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen meeting, the Board of Finance is going to consider the recommendation and then decide about whether we're okay with putting the funds available into the budget that that will allow the Board of Selectmen then to choose to do the to exercise the option on Edgewood. So that and we'll probably make a recommendation one way or another about what we think about the financial aspect of the Edgewood Edgewood purpose, and then that gives the Board of Selectmen the option to pursue Edgewood if, depending on how the referendum turns out and depending on what happens after that. But our role is to consider the recommendation that the task force gives and the overall financial aspects of it, and pass it along to the Board of Selectmen if we feel that it's a reasonable option to pursue.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. Jeff, at that point, I'm wondering if you can then tell us what happens after the Board of Finance votes whether or not to include the $2.1 million in the town budget for the upcoming year.
So from there, it is our hope that we'll be able to do the referendum if the COVID-19 restrictions that the governor has in place are lifted. That is the desire of the complete Board of Selectmen. All 6 selectmen voted affirmative to, if any way, we can hold a referendum in time. If the COVID-19 governor's restrictions are not lifted in time to get the referendum done, it will be up to the Board of Selectmen to make a decision to vote for or against the purchase of the Edgewood.
Okay, thank you for that. And Ray, you can go to the next slide. So I want to make sure everyone hears this loud and clear, because I think all 3 of the parties on the last page are aligned here. The state quarantine, as we know, has been extended now to May 20th. However, the Board of Selectmen, in their meeting on April 2nd, confirmed their commitment to attempt to hold a referendum if possible, with the intention to hold that referendum in July. So the task force fully supports the Board of Selectmen's decision to make every effort to hold a referendum. All right, Ray, next slide. Thank you. Another area where we've heard a lot of feedback, ranging from concern to ideas to recommendations, is the future of Ballentine pool at Ballentine Park. We've received a lot of questions. If we were to proceed with Edgewood, what would happen to the pool at Ballentine? And there's been a lot of great suggestions on how that might be repurposed, either as a skate park. We've heard a splash pad for younger children, maybe even a second pool, a smaller lap pool that wouldn't be as expensive to build as the one that's currently there. Keeping the building but turning it into a meeting space, renovating it for a teen center perhaps. There may be other suggestions as well. But it's obviously captured the imagination of a lot of residents in town. And we, as a task force, are all aligned and agree that there's a lot of potential there. And no one wants to see Ballantyne, that corner of Ballantyne Park, sit idle. That's not anybody's goal. However, it is beyond the scope of this task force to make that recommendation. That's not what we've been tasked to do. And that is a project that would require some time and some resources. And that is not the focus of our work to date. So we definitely, as a task force, are all aligned in supporting long-term planning for the Ballantyne pool site. However, we believe that a new task force should be formed to explore all future opportunities at Ballantyne Park. We don't believe it should be us. We have enough for doing otherwise. And there's a lot of additional thoughts and perspectives that should be and could be incorporated into this process. So we believe that strongly that we are going to take that line in bold there, and that's going to become a condition of our recommendation. That we agree on a recommendation, but that also this new task force should be formed, and there should be resources and effort put behind pursuing future opportunities at the Ballantyne Park pool site should we move forward with Edgewood. Another piece of feedback that we have heard is people being skeptical of the costs. The first thing we did as a task force, the very first thing in our very first meeting back on February 6th, was review the engineering report by Weston and Sampson. And the net result of that report was it would require significant reconstruction of the pool house and basically a rebuild of the pool, and that would cost $4.6 million in their estimation. So our first goal was to challenge and push back on that cost and see, was it rooted in reality? Or could we find something comparable? Were there cheaper options out there? That's when we enlisted the help of Hugh Sullivan, who's on this call. So instead of, think of it like building a house. Instead of hiring a builder who's going to have all the subs come in and do it, and at the end you pay the builder for the price of the house, we tried to GC it ourselves. And so we got quotes from local pool experts. Hugh helped us with quotes for square footage on rebuilding the pool house. And we came up with Hugh's analysis of a cost approaching $3.8 million. So now we have two reliable quotes that should give us a range on what a Ballentine replacement project should cost. But to honor the feedback that we received, people not understanding how it could be that much, asking us to verify that with another quote, and we are now in the process of doing that. So we are currently pursuing a third estimate, this time from a firm that is outside the Southbury area, a firm that specializes in municipal pool projects. And we're working with that group currently, and we will have more information to report back on that estimate soon. But so that it's understood, all of these will be baselined on a replacement of what we currently have at Ballentine Park in terms of the pool, with pool house facility upgrades that would be in line with current ADA standards. So we will have a third opinion on what a replacement project at Ballentine will cost, and then we'll factor that in. So stay tuned. As George said, we're probably going to have another presentation at some point, and as soon as that estimate is available, it'll be released on the website, just as we've done with all the other support documents. So I want to transition to another phase of the presentation now. And as we went through the comments that we've received, we started to notice some trends. We were receiving multiple comments that hit on one subject area. And if that subject area could be clarified or was perhaps a misconception, we grouped those together, and we want to review those tonight. So, Ray, if you could zoom out a little bit, because I'm not able to see the full slide view on my screen. Thank you. So the first misconception that we want to address, and this is coming from a couple of comments, we've put a highlighter over the part of the comment that makes the most sense here. But the idea that upgrades to Ballentine would make it one of the newest pools in the region, which would attract more citizens and visitors than it currently does. Is there value in Ballentine pool where with more money to get a state-of-the-art pool? I think the sentiment in these quotes is that the price tag that we just discussed, anywhere ranging from 3.79 to 4.6 million currently, would deliver a state-of-the-art pool to the Ballentine pool site. But we want to be very clear that that's actually not the case. And if you go to the next slide, Ray. So that, let's call it 4 million as somewhere in between those two quotes. That $4 million investment does not build us what you would consider a state-of-the-art crown jewel facility. That is basically a replica of the pool that we have currently, with the expanded pool house. That's ADA compliant. But that is not a full bells and whistles development project at Ballentine. That is simply to replace what we currently have. This state-of-the-art pool that I think people are hoping for is at Edgewood. It has the sloped entry. It has expanded decking, almost nearly 3 times the square footage of the decking we currently have. It comes with the USTA grade tennis courts, a basketball court, a playground. It's an entire complex. That is not what we would be receiving for $4 million at Ballentine, and that needs to be addressed. We would be paying nearly twice the amount for much less of a facility and much less of a pool. And to replicate a state-of-the-art facility like Edgewood, now you're talking well beyond a $4 million price tag, and it's not inconceivable to think it'd be double that. So I want to make sure people understand what you're getting if you're advocating no Edgewood, but yes to spending $4 million at Ballentine. Next slide, Ray. There's been some public comment that there's no way the cost estimates we've received to date could be true, because Waterbury is building a pool for $1.5 million. Why does ours have to be so expensive if Waterbury can build one for $1.5 million? So that $1.5 million, that's a quote from an article regarding the Hamilton pool in the city of Waterbury. It's a public pool. This was an article that came out towards the end of February. And they were looking at options, just as we are, to do something with that pool because it has now deteriorated beyond the point of use. And they estimated in that article $1.5 million to repair it. So if we go to the next slide, Ray, we need to understand that that is not an apples to apples comparison. We've been in touch with both the city of Waterbury and the company who estimated that Hamilton pool project. So the company that said it would be $1.5 million to replace their pool. What you need to understand is that the $1.5 million pool is about 2,700 square feet, and that's about 60% the size currently of the Ballentine pool. So it's a much smaller pool. That $1.5 million quote did not include any decking or site work. It's just for dropping the pool in the ground. If you don't want it to be surrounded by dirt and you have to build a concrete patio around it, that's additional cost. The Hamilton pool estimate does not include the required changes to their pool house. They are facing a very similar scenario to us in that they would need to upgrade their pool house facility. That project is not scoped in the $1.5 million estimated price tag. The Hamilton pool also doesn't include a children's area, which Ballentine does. So when you say this town's getting it for this, why can't we get it for that? It's because we're comparing two vastly different projects. And the town of Waterbury couldn't complete their project for the price listed in the article because there's much more work to be done there. It's the same scenario that we find ourselves in with Ballentine. There's been a lot of talk about the ability to redevelop Ballentine Park. We've seen this a lot on Facebook. There was a letter to the editor in the Voices newspaper just this past week. The idea being that Ballentine Park has acreage that we could develop into an expanded pool complex and then even a community or a regional community center down the line. And there have been maps drawn, and there's a campaign to redraw Ballentine. And I think we're all in favor of that kind of creative approach. I think we all love the idea of how can we get more out of our park spaces and reimagine them and make them even more beautiful and enjoyed by even more residents. But there is a problem with the notion that this Ballentine acreage is up for grabs. It's not. And if we go to the next slide. Ballentine perhaps does have some room to expand a pool project beyond the pool's current footprint, but not a lot. As it is, we're already going to be eating potentially into parking spaces if we expand that pool house. So we need to find room for more parking. We need to find more square footage for the expanded footprint that goes above and beyond the pool house. The pool currently sits very close to tennis courts. There's volleyball courts. It backs up to a picnic pavilion, which the town uses annually after the Memorial Day parade, but it's also used by family gatherings and volunteer gatherings all summer long. And the pool backs right up to this space. There's a basketball court, but most importantly, our youth softball programs call Ballentine Park home. And any expansion to the left of the pool starts to encroach into the outfield spaces of those fields. Can you build out into those spaces and not damage any of those facilities? Perhaps, I don't know, but either do the people suggesting that we could do it, right? It's a complicated process because we've packed a lot into Ballentine Park. That's why it's so beloved. There's so many facilities there. And anytime you cut into one of those amenities, you're creating a new problem to be addressed. You can say, hey, those tennis courts are 50 years old. Why don't we just pave those over and make them part of the parking lot and part of the pool house? Well, now we have to find a replacement for those tennis courts somewhere else, because where do our tennis players play? Right? Now we've taken more court space out. So it's a very delicate, intricate dance once you get into starting to reconfigure and rearrange the elements in that park, because there are so many. So we want to make sure it's understood there's not 20 free open acres sitting in the middle of town where we can just plop a community center or a pool of any footprint. It's a very defined space within Ballentine Park, and we would need to be respectful of that footprint. One of the most contentious topics that we've seen regarding Edgewood is the misinterpretation of the Edgewood inspection report. And I'll use the term misinterpretation for now. I want to believe that it's being misinterpreted, accidentally, and not as a bad faith gesture, because there's been a lot made about problems that have been highlighted in the Edgewood inspection report that I think have been widely blown out of proportion, and we need to understand exactly what's in there. I'm not going to assume that everyone has read the full 30-page inspection report. Most people have seized upon the last 2 pages of that report, which in summary lists 15 items in poor condition from the inspector. So we're seeing suggestions like, based on the inspection report, it seems as though Edgewood has not been well maintained. These 35 pages are very shocking. Comments like that, though, and later on in this comment, this is a money pit. So if we go to the next slide, we can look at the 15 items that have been called in this space and on social media as shocking and a money pit. The first thing I want to draw your attention to, these 15 items that are listed in poor condition have all been noted as being part of normal wear and tear. Right? So there's nothing here that you wouldn't expect to see from a 10-year-old facility. The second reassuring thing is that of these 15 items, the seller has agreed to repair or replace 14 of the 15. The one item, number 3, that the seller pushed back on, the synthetic surface on the basketball court, is beginning to deteriorate. And later on, that comment in the inspection report says this is due to normal wear and tear. We have built into our Edgewood purchase price a $50,000 line item that is for the purpose of resurfacing the tennis courts and the basketball court, because our intention is to keep those courts in top-notch condition. As it stands, just last season, they were continuing to be rented out as a facility to hold USTA tennis events. You don't do that if the courts are in poor, unplayable condition. So the seller pushed back, saying these courts are not in need of resurfacing at the time. And we as a town said, well, if we're going to acquire this, we want to make sure it's received in top-notch condition. But the other items here, and not to get into all of them, the water heater. I've seen some comments online about the water heater, and that's an expensive item. The owner is replacing those. So that's not on us. In fact, that we've known that since the beginning of this process. The owner had always intended to replace the water heaters prior to even having the inspection on the property done. So that was not a surprise. In fact, the owner, may have pointed that out to the inspector. I'm not sure. I wasn't there at the time. But she's always been very upfront about that. But then when we look at some of these other things, the very concerning items in this inspection report, the money pit items, the right end of a gutter is leaking. The gate latch on a left-hand pool gate is damaged. We have window locks on 3 windows that are damaged and need to be replaced. The rubber supply line to a washing machine is showing evidence of deterioration, as a rubber hose might, which is 10 years old. Again, I want to assume that these are not bad faith arguments, but if you read these line items and you suggest that these are shocking, that these are in any way a money pit and indicative of poor maintenance, I would say it's absolutely 180 degrees the other way. You would love to sell a complex this large after 10 years and have this be your punch list of things to do. But fear not, the seller has agreed to repair and replace all of these items except for item number 3. You hate to use an opportunity like this to make good guys and bad guys, but we have seen a lot of comments that there are other properties in town that are in disrepair. So why should the town be trusted with managing the Edgewood complex? There's been reference to the ongoing neglect of Southbury properties. You know, who's been in charge of maintaining our current courts, pool facilities, and the basketball court? Why are they in such disrepair? Where have our tax dollars gone? We've received a couple of comments like that. So let's talk about the management of the Edgewood facility should the town exercise that option. Next slide, right? So town facilities are all maintained on a regular cyclical basis. We would all wish that there were more maintenance dollars available at all times, but the reality is it's scheduled maintenance because you can't serve all needs at any one given time. However, the task force agrees that the Edgewood property should be maintained to the highest standard of a revenue-producing entity. So we've actually asked to expand our scope and investigate management models. This has actually become a condition of our recommendation. So we've begun to make preliminary contact with management companies, as well as other community centers, such as the Newtown Community Center, researching their models and looking at their recommendations to see how they manage and maintain their facilities. Now, it's important to note that the financial analysis that's been done for Edgewood does include a special ongoing maintenance fund to replace, to do yearly maintenance, obviously, but also larger ticket items that may come due. There's an ongoing rollover maintenance fund that's been built into our financial analysis of this property. And any excess revenue generated at Edgewood would remain at the facility for future sustainability. So our model does show Edgewood being able to generate excess revenue above a break-even cost. And if that's the case, that money would continue to be put into the facility for ongoing upkeep. And that's in addition to what's been budgeted. All right, next slide, right? We continue to get some feedback about Middlebury being a bridge too far for some. How could you convince people to travel to Middlebury to utilize this facility? Did the task force determine if additional time to go to Edgewood would serve as a disincentive for people to pay for a membership? Places too far, residents won't join and pay. So we shouldn't purchase property in another town because it's going to be too far for residents to travel. And to address that misconception, you would like to bring two things to your attention. We've mentioned this on our previous two presentations, but I think it's important to understand again. The map here is small, but we did calculate drive times from 30 random Southbury addresses. Now, we distributed those points the second time around based on where the majority of single-family housing in Southbury is clustered. And I know this map is small on your screen, but if you can look toward the eastern side of that map, if you look the right-hand side, and yeah, Ray's running the cursor over it, but all those yellow areas, all those yellow rectangles, those are all single-family housing lots. We have nearly 5,000 single-family homes here in Southbury. 90% of them do not have private pools in their backyards. So of this yellow area that neatly fits between point B on the map, which is Ballentine Pool, and point E, which is just over the border, that's Edgewood facility, is where the majority of our single-family homes are located. So the idea that Edgewood is any further away than Ballentine doesn't necessarily hold true depending on where you're located. Now, when you plot the 30 points, we do include points, for example, up in the Purchase or up on George's Hill, areas that are not in this zone of single-family housing on the map. And because we have some points further away that are clearly closer to Ballentine, your average distance does end up being 2 minutes longer, approximately, just under 2 minutes longer, the average of the 30 points. However, it's even shorter if you consider where most of the single-family residents in Southbury live, and it is closer to the eastern side, closer to Edgewood. But I want to go back to a previous comment, which is, have any studies been done that, I forget the exact wording. Go back, Ray, if you don't mind. That sounded very bossy. Please go back, Ray. Did the task force determine if additional time to Edgewood would serve as a disincentive for people to pay for a membership? So we didn't have to do much work because that's not a hypothetical. Currently, there are more Southbury families who are members of the Edgewood pool than they are members of the Ballentine pool. So that tells me that it hasn't been a disincentive at all, and especially when you consider that a summer family membership to Edgewood is nearly 3 times the cost as a summer family membership to Ballentine. So not only is the drive not a disincentive, the cost hasn't been a disincentive. So I'm having trouble imagining a reality where dropping that cost by $700 somehow is a disincentive for people who are already okay making that drive and paying that amount of money. We do expect to lose perhaps some of those memberships due to attrition. But this is not a hypothetical that we have to do surveys or studies on. We already know more Southbury families are using Edgewood than are using Ballentine. Now, it may not be the best for you. You may live in a place where Edgewood is just too far to drive, and that is a reasonable position to take. And if that's your situation, we certainly respect it, and you don't have to make the drive to Edgewood, right? But for the majority of residents, for the greater good of Southbury, Edgewood is not the bridge too far that it's being portrayed to be. We've seen a few comments where people are suggesting it's a bad time to be considering Edgewood because of the current situation with the global pandemic. It's a bad time to purchase. Has the seller been contacted to see if they are amenable to extending the option given the pandemic? If so, was there any response? I'm concerned on making this major decision long-term under extreme conditions. Another comment, in light of the current situation, I believe the town should postpone a decision. The economic impact of the pandemic is unknown. Even the idea of opening the town pool this summer is not guaranteed. So there's a couple of points that we want to bring up to address this misconception. And they're on the next slide. Here we go. The reality is it's a good time to purchase. We need to be clear. We've said it a couple of times, but that last comment about opening up the pool this summer probably won't even happen suggests that I think people still are confused. If the Edgewood purchase was to go through, it wouldn't be the town pool until next summer. If there is a summer swim season, if it's in the public health's best interest to open up a town pool this summer, that will be Valentine, regardless of any decision made on Edgewood. All right, Ballentine will be the town pool for summer 2020. If we go ahead and purchase Edgewood, that would not be the town pool until next summer, 2021, nearly 14 months away. Hopefully by then we're not still talking about a global pandemic, but we need to make that clear that this is not, if you feel like this is being rushed to be opened in 2 months, that is not the case. It's not until 2021. But to address some of the other questions, has the seller been contacted about extending the deadline? Yes, the seller has been contacted, and the seller has declined to extend our purchase option. So our opportunity, if we want to take advantage of it, is now. Now, why would the seller decline the purchase of this, or decline to extend our purchase option? Well, as a task force, we believe it's highly unlikely that the opportunity would be available to us after that option expires. And we've made mention to this before, but we have certain information that indicates that the property would not be available once our purchase option expires. Regardless of what's happening in the world today, the town of Southbury has an obligation to address its future needs and not kick the can down the road. The issue of the town pool does not go away if we decide to not purchase Edgewood. In fact, it leads to a very uncertain future. We've known the problems at Ballentine Pool have existed for a while now, and there has not been a clear path to addressing them, right? So passing on Edgewood actually leads to a bit more of an uncertain future as to what would happen to a town pool project. But we know this, it takes one of our best options and one of our most certain options in terms of cost and in terms of timing. It takes that certain option off the table and opens the status of a town pool up to a lot of uncertainty. It's best explained by saying opportunity only knocks once, and we think this is a great opportunity for the town, as summarized by this comment that was sent in. Buy it. This is a historic opportunity. Let's not forego it. This would be a great acquisition for the town, and this task force believes that. And I would also like to say this was not submitted by the seller. we will eventually, once comments close, we'll be releasing the full list of comments, and you'll see them be attributed to Southbury residents. So that is coming in the future. Another misconception we want to address: Ballentine can be fixed. The idea that don't do anything, just fix Ballentine. All right, here's a comment. Residents need money for rising expenses. Just fix Ballentine Park. It's good enough. Maybe we fix the pool to last 5 more years, and we plan on a new pool then. People are losing jobs. Fix Ballentine. All right, so there's this concept that Ballentine can somehow be fixed. And here's how we need to address that. We've tried fixing Ballentine. If you can go to the next slide, Ray. This project started where we've already tried to fix Ballentine. But once we got into that repair project, once the guts of the pool were opened up as a potential fix, we realized that the repair could not be done. So there is no fixing option. We've been told that the town has, another year, possibly another 2 seasons with the pool before it becomes a liability and unusable. At this stage, the fix is full replacement. And when you talk about expense, when people say it's a bad economy, just fix the pool. Well, fixing the pool requires replacing the pool. And that is not, I think, the economic story you're looking to tell here. So I want to break down a couple more things, new information. Some of this information we weren't sure if we were allowed to share it. Those of you that have been following this process know that there's been an NDA with the seller. And so certain things we weren't able to release, but we've gotten permission to do so. And this is one of them. So let's take a look at all of the options that we have on the table currently for a town pool, if a town pool is to be addressed. The cost to purchase Edgewood is set in stone. We know the purchase price. We know the timeline. It's $2.1 million. And that's our cost to take ownership of that complex. The cost to replace Ballentine, I'm going to be generous here and go with the low quote that we've received. West End Sampson engineering firm believes it's $4.6 million. We have a third opinion coming, and we'll share that. But for now, let's play devil's advocate and let's go with the lowest price that we have. Let's assume it's $3.7 to replace Ballentine. So not quite double the cost, but as it was stated earlier, close to double the cost for replicating what we have with a larger ADA compliant pool house that doesn't include the other amenities at Edgewood, like 6 tennis courts, like a basketball court, like a playground, like a snack bar facility. What we can share with you now is that when this facility was built 10 years ago, the owner paid $5.3 million, roughly. That was their all-in construction cost. So I've seen arguments that I would hope would be a misunderstanding, when they see what the property is appraised for, and people say, see, this property isn't worth $2 million. It's only appraised at $1 million. Not understanding how property appraisals are used in terms of valuations, but also when we say it's pennies on the dollar, it's because we're buying a facility at $2.1 million that cost 10 years ago $5.3 million to build. But here's the thing, that was 10 years ago. And so there's an adage that the cheapest time to build anything is right now, because costs only go up. And in 10 years' time, it's impossible to say how much it would cost now to try and build that 5.3 million 2010 project today. We don't even want to put a number on it because we haven't got an opinion on it. But suffice to say, it's going to be more than $5.3 million. There are those that say every 10 years the price of building doubles. I don't know that it's that. I don't know that it's a $10 million project if you were to build it today. All I know is that it would cost you well above what we are looking to purchase the property for, which is $2.1 million. So the timeline, let's address the timeline. Some minor updates since we all last had a chance to speak. Today is the last of 3 scheduled information sessions. On April 16th, we will be submitting a report with our official recommendation on Edgewood. On April 20th, there will be a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance to consider the Edgewood recommendation. On that day, the Board of Finance will vote to finalize the budget. Somewhere around June 20th. That is the final decision date for a referendum if possible. Again, it is the Board of Selectmen's intention, as I understand it, and as Jeff has said to me, that every opportunity will be taken to hold a referendum on the purchase of Edgewood. The only reason that can't be a firm commitment now is because of the current health crisis, right? And we all know that it can't happen before May 20th. That deadline's been extended by Governor Lamont twice already. So let's hope May 20th, that's the last of that deadline, and then we are able to schedule a referendum. But I do know we have the Board of Selectmen's commitment that they are going to hold out as long as they possibly can hold out to hold a town referendum on the purchase of Edgewood. July 31st is our final day to exercise the option to purchase Edgewood Bath and Tennis Club. And upon execution of that option, the closing date is 120 days from that date. So if we were to exercise that option on July 31st, then you go what? August, September, October, looks like the end of November, the town would take ownership of the property. I'm going to leave a final note here. So there's been a lot of interest in town regarding this property. There have been a couple of folks that have taken it upon themselves to check the property out, positive and negative. Some people checking it out to look for flaws. Other people just wanting to see what the hubbub is about and writing us glowing reviews. We've had people submitting comments saying, hey, we were bored, so we decided to take a drive by the property, and it looks fantastic. We can't wait to take the grandkids there, which is a wonderful sentiment. But regardless of whether you're there to point out faults or to check it out for yourself, you can only be on that property if you're authorized, because it is still private property. So we're going to encourage people again and really emphasize, please don't show up unannounced on the property. That is considered trespassing. And the owner has put local police on notice. So please, we're going to do our best to have an open house in some way, shape, or form where the entire community can check the space out. But until the details of that are announced, we urge you, if you're not an invited guest or member of Edgewood, to please don't show up unannounced on the property. Thank you in advance for being respectful of that. And that concludes my portion of this presentation. Listed below is the URL where all of the information and documents that we've been discussing can be accessed. We are leaving that form open, continuing to accept feedback, comments, questions. We encourage you to do so for as long as that is open. And with that, I will pass the mic back to George, who will go through some additional questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That was a nice presentation. Some of what we're going to talk about here in the questions section will be redundant. We've heard a lot about some of these same issues from Tom in his presentation, but they come up so frequently in the comments that I just felt a need to maybe say it 2 or 3 times, so maybe we get the message across. The first thing I'd like to address is what I consider a misconception, and that's acquiring Edgewood will increase our taxes. From all of our analysis, and we have our top fiscal people in the town involved with this project, there is no tax increase involved with acquiring Edgewood. However, if you go to rebuild Ballentine Pool, it would result in a tax increase. We currently have reserve funds to purchase Edgewood. Our reserve funds aren't sufficient to pay for a Ballentine rebuild project, as far as we know, based on the estimates today. It looks like it would cost about double to rebuild Ballentine Pool compared to buying Edgewood. So compared to the 2 options, if you compare them, the Edgewood acquisition has a much lower probability of raising your taxes than a rebuild of Ballentine Pool. I'll open it up to the group. Any comments from our task force members?
Mrs. Michaels, that's exactly correct.
Yeah, this is Tom Connor. I agree. And so I'm remain concerned that we keep getting feedback, somehow thinking that fixed Ballentine is a financially better solution for our taxes.
Dan, you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, George, I agree with both John, Tom, and yourself. When we put together the budget last year, we had earmarked $1.2 million for the pool. We have enough money in our unassigned general fund where we wouldn't have to worry about raising taxes to purchase Edgewood. Whereas if we had to do the Ballentine project, we would have to bond part of it, and that bond payment would result in higher taxes.
Anyone else have a comment here? Okay, let's go on to the next question. And it's a similar question, but I see it come in both ways. The first question, the one we just went through, talks about how the simple acquisition of Edgewood would increase taxes. We have an additional cohort of comments coming in that claim Edgewood will operate in the red and thereby increase our taxes. The truth of the matter is that Ballentine has run in the red for a long time. I say decades, but I don't really know. I haven't seen those numbers, but I assume it's more than just a few years. Last year, the town spent $90,000 of taxpayer money to subsidize Ballentine's operation. We anticipate, based on conservative estimates of membership, that Edgewood operations would result in a positive cash flow to Southbury. And it appears that Edgewood operations could be self-sustaining despite normal annual cost increases and will not have to be subsidized by taxpayers. So the fact that folks send in comments, and I see a number of them, being concerned And, I understand the concern about increasing in taxes. I don't want to pay more taxes either. So the option of fixing or trying to rebuild Ballentine will result in increased taxes, whereas buying Edgewood will not, based on operating expenses. The finance team members have anything they want to add to this?
Hey,
This is
George.
Michael. This is Michael's, that's right.
And George, it's Dan. Yeah, I agree with John that if we look at this, we based very conservatively on the numbers we put through for Edgewood. We know that Ballentine runs at an operating loss each year, and as we looked at the potential numbers, what we all budgeting is an estimate, but the estimated numbers we did were conservative. We think that this property could be self-sustaining.
Tom, you have anything you want to add?
No, I agree broadly with everything that's been said. I do agree that this is probably the biggest contingency piece of Edgewood is that we don't, that whether we can run it on a self-sustainable basis, but we've done a fair amount of investigation of that already and believe that we can. And it offers, I think part of the reason for that is it offers a lot of other opportunities that Ballentine didn't for us.
I would like to refer people to a memo that came in just today from Kevin Bielmeyer, our Economic Development Director. He has looked at how how Edgewood could actually generate increased revenues. He has a number of ideas listed there that I thought were interesting. He looks at things a little differently as an economic development person than maybe a business person would look at things.
And George, I think it's, again, it's Tom Connor. I think it would, we've talked about this before, but there's a lot of other kinds of cash flow that comes into Edgewood that doesn't come into Ballentine for other reasons, like the USTA stuff, like the stuff associated with the region. So it's not just about the pool; it's about things there that other things there that provide additional income in addition to the membership piece.
And Kevin's looking to go even beyond what we've considered and have, somewhat an entrepreneurial spirit about holding more tennis tournaments and maybe more swimming meets and things. But you can read his report at your leisure. I haven't. It just came in literally like 5 minutes before we locked up this presentation today, so I haven't incorporated any of his comments into anything we're talking about here.
George,
Go ahead.
This is Michael's again. The four people who developed this economic operating model do this, three of the four of us for a living. Three of us are elected officials who want to get this right because our names and reputation on the line. And one is our fiscal director who for his lifetime has been deep in this kind of analysis. So I would hope that taxpayers would trust their elected officials and the people with significant credentials in this kind of work rather than the brickbats that are appearing in social media. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing nothing, let's go on to the next question, Ray. Thanks for scrolling. Another misconception that I hear or see rather in the comments is that a concern that the taxes paid to Middlebury will be hefty and we can't bear that burden. I think it's fair to say that as time goes on, all costs will go up in insurance, electricity, taxes, maintenance fees tend to rise. Membership fees will go up too, probably. And if we do buy Edgewood under the current situation, we would owe taxes to Middlebury. Those taxes are included in the fiscal analysis that our financial team has put together for Edgewood. and they're included in the operating costs. The study shows that even with conservative membership numbers, really to the low side of expectations, that Edgewood operations would put money into the town's coffers as opposed to what we've seen with Ballentine. The fiscal plan shows that Edgewood would be a self-sustaining facility so that it would not require taxpayer funds to keep it in operation. As I've said before, Ballentine's pool operation was subsidized by taxpayers by the tune of $90,000 last year, and it's been like that for many years. Edgewood should be able to change the equation by adding funds instead of taking funds away. Any comments from our fiscal experts?
Hey, George, it's Dan. And yeah, when we looked at the Edgewood property, we are assuming the real estate taxes paid to Middlebury are just like any other expenditures that we would pay. And as long as, our revenue estimates are there, all that would be rolled into the financial analysis that we put together. Our estimate is that we would have some money left over at the end of the year to put back into the fund balance to keep maintaining the excellent quality of the facility.
Tom, John?
No, this is a repeat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, I agree. Again, I also agree, though, that this is probably the biggest unknown with Edgewood, but we've done every analysis that we can to try to be comfortable in saying this. But as you note, that if it's just self-sustaining, and if we don't even if we don't put anything back in the coffers, as you say, if it's self-sustaining, we're saving the $90,000 we're paying right now in terms of Ballentine.
Okay. Anything else from the team? All right. Ray, you can scroll it up. Thank you. Another misconception that Tom Marks has so eloquently covered in his presentation is that the Edgewood facility is in bad shape. We have retaining walls that are washed out, basketball courts that are shot. Some people have called it a dump. It's falling apart. It's a money pit. A couple of self-described experts on social media have made some very adverse claims about the condition of Edgewood. And if they were true, they would certainly make anyone question the validity of doing the acquisition at all. However, our own inspections, and we've all been there, I've been there many, many times, and everybody on this task force has been through that facility several times at least. And according to the building inspector that we've hired, it's exactly the opposite. And I'm really baffled as to how social media can just make the claims that they do, but that's the way social media is, I guess. Any other comments here?
George, it's Dan. And as was stated earlier, the Edgewood tennis team, they have a couple of USTA tennis teams, and the USTA would not allow that facility to host events if it was any kind of poor condition.
Anyone else? Okay, well, let's go on to the next question. I think we've covered this point before, but I'll cover it again because I see it so much in the commentary we get on the online submittal. It's not practical to fix Ballentine. Well, let me go back. I mean, people say, oh, let's just fix Ballentine and save money. That, I guess in their minds, they just think, oh, it's easier to fix something and you'll save money as opposed to buying something new. A lot of times if you have an old car, that's true. I mean, you can fix the car, throw a couple grand into it, and it's cheaper than paying $30,000 for a new car. But that's not the case here. The cost to fix Ballentine, as far as we know it, is about $3.7 million. It's just not a viable option. The pool has deteriorated to the point that repair work isn't really going to work. We've already tried it. Jeff described, I think, some of the work with the vinyl liner. We tried a vinyl liner. They tried putting it in. As soon as they started crack it into the concrete to get it installed, they found the concrete wasn't solid enough to work on. So at that point, we realized the repair wasn't going to happen, and it just kind of, numbers just kept escalating from there. We ended up with the Weston and Sampson numbers. Some of the Weston and Sampson numbers were up as high as $6 million, and that scared the bejesus out of everybody in town. And I think Hugh Sullivan's number of 3.7 is a pretty reasonable number. And again, it's not fixing, it's rebuilding, because fixing is just not possible. Any thoughts from the team?
You know, I'll chime in really quickly, George. Michael Ganem, our new Parks and Rec director, wrote a nice letter in today. And in reading that over, you know, he mentioned last year, June of 2019, the pool committee that was established to take a look at options for Ballentine Park. And that, again, a lot of the people I think on this call sat on that pool committee. And in addition to, you know, other selectmen, Mike Rosen, I think, was on that. And as Michael describes in his letter, it became apparent to many of us that the scope of any project at Ballentine Park would be greater than anticipated. And I think that's what we're getting at here, is that there's an unknown here. It's impractical to fix it, because the deeper you get into it, the more you realize needs to be redone and replaced. And I think that plays into your next misconception as well about the risk involved.
Hey, George,
Any
this
other
is Dan. I was on that committee as well, and going into that committee, you know, I was fully anticipating that we'd be able to maintain or fix Ballentine for the $1.2 million that we had anticipated. I believe the first estimate we got on that for that committee to fix the pool or repair the pool was $5.5 million.
Anybody else? All right, we'll go on to the next question, or the next misconception. I see commentary coming in that buying Edgewood is a riskier proposition than fixing Ballentine. In fact, the opposite is true. Edgewood is ready to go. You pay the money to buy it. You know, we put in about $100,000 in some repair like resurfacing, contingency costs, and there's a $40,000 closing cost. So the whole cost goes up to about $2.1 million. But it's a turnkey operation. If you buy it, it's ready to run. There's not a lot of uncertainty in the cost. Ballentine, on the other hand, would have to be demolished and rebuilt from scratch. You can't fix it. And with any new construction, costs are highly uncertain. I don't know if anybody out there has gone through building a house for themselves or for someone else. Did you ever hit the budget that you set at the beginning? I know I built a house and I did not. So I don't, maybe everybody else is a better general contractor than I am, but I missed the mark by quite a bit. Any comments from the group? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next one. I'm reluctant lately to go on social media, but I will admit, spent some time looking at some of the comments. And we're aware that there's just been a tidal wave of Facebook postings regarding the merits and demerits of acquiring what we call the Edgewood Sports Complex. Some of the postings are factual, some are, you know, reasonable, asking reasonable questions that deserve an answer, but many are just not. Some appear to be deliberately misleading. I'm not shocked by any of this. I've been in politics long enough to know how some people like to play the game, but that's what's going on. And our advice is to take any of those Facebook posts with a grain of salt. Everyone's entitled to an opinion, but please make an effort to get the facts before you pass judgment. There's plenty of information on the town website to assist in that process. And I think one of the biggest events I'm hoping will occur in the near future is some sort of open house or some sort of visitation schedule where citizens who are interested can go to Edgewood and actually take a look at it and see for themselves what's going on there, what the physical condition of the property really is. That's that's information we'll have to get out to you later. We don't have that set up yet. Any comments from anybody? All right, let's go on to the next question. This has been covered before, but I'll cover it again because it keeps coming up. Why purchase Edgewood now when the 2020 swim season is in jeopardy from COVID-19? If we do acquire Edgewood, we will not take it over until the 2021 swim season. The current owners will operate Edgewood throughout the 2020 season. And if there is a 2020 season at Ballentine, the town will continue to operate Ballentine as it has in the past for 2020. I don't think anybody has something else they want to add to that. We'll go to the next question. This is a more complicated question, and it comes up over and over again. Why don't we just get some real bids to rebuild Valentine Pool? That way we'll know the actual cost instead of only estimating. To get actual costs on a rebuild, you'd have to create a full package of design documents. Creating a document package like that is expensive and time consuming. Typically, the cost of generating the required design documents is about 6% of the value of the project. So if we assume a Ballentine rebuild is $4 million for a round number, the cost of just creating the design documents that you would need to go out and get real bids is about $240,000. The town, as a rule, does not go for bids until a project has been approved. For this reason, you're not only wasting your own time and money, but you're also wasting time and money of the contractors who are doing the bidding. So anyway, before approval, the town relies on estimates, which is what exactly we have done here with this project, with the Ballantyne rebuild estimates. This is how the library was done, and it's how the current town hall was done. Estimates first. You look at the estimates, you decide if you want to go forward. Then you do the design documents and you get the bids. The town, historically, we rely on estimate. This process has been the way we've done it for forever. Any other comments on this, John?
Unmute. Nope, that's what we've done in the past. This states it clearly and simply. I don't know of any organization that doesn't decide to do anything until they get bids. Until they get estimates, and then they go to bid to figure. If it costs more, well, usually what happens is you end up putting more money in the project. So get professional estimates done by credible people that are vetted are the way governments decide to go ahead with the project. That's what we've done here.
Anything else? Tom, Dan? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to the next issue. The cracks in Edgewood tennis courts are just as bad as the cracks in the Pomperog High School tennis courts. This is simply not true. There are some minor surface cracks in the Edgewood courts. These can be repaired, basically by resurfacing. The cost to resurface all 6 tennis courts and the basketball court at Edgewood, and we've had I guess an estimate, I don't think it's actually a quote, but it's for $50,000 from, I believe it's the same company that resurfaced them in the past. The cracking of the tennis courts at Pomperog High School is a whole different story. I think Tom Marks in his last presentation described them as tectonic plate shifting, which I thought was kind of funny. But I think it's a good description. These courts can't be resurfaced anymore. You have to tear them up and rebuild them from scratch. The cost estimate to rebuild is about $1 million. And that would be paid for by Region 15, which, as we said before, is 67% Southbury. So if somebody wants to rebuild, I mean, I've seen comments where folks say, well, just tell Region 15 to rebuild the courts. Well, that's Region 15 is we're paying 2/3 of that. So it's really the same thing as the town doing it almost. But I really don't know what Pomperaug High is going to do with those courts. I haven't heard a plan. People have asked that question. I don't know the answer. Anyone else have a comment in the group?
Hey, George, it's Dan again. I believe the courts at Edgewood, even the small surface cracks are very, very minor. Anyone that plays at that court, the biggest complaint is the courts play too fast. So I don't believe there's any issue with the surface cracks at Edgewood. The ones at the region are actually through the sub-cement, so yes, they would have to be torn up and totally rebuilt.
Anything else? Any from the group?
Well, and it's Tom, and as we've emphasized that if the region continues to continue practice and waits on this, then at least we're going to get the money that they pay Edgewood now to rent the Edgewood courts, essentially.
I don't believe they have the $1 million in their current budget for redoing the courts, so I assume they're going to be like left alone for a while. Any other comments? Okay, let's go on. Another misconception that I've seen in some of the commentary is that the driveways and parking lots at Edgewood are in bad shape. Simply not true. They're showing normal wear and some cracking that a 10-year-old parking lot facility would show. As with our town roads of similar age, the town, once we acquire it, will, defer to Jeff on this, but I believe we're planning to cover them with a chip sealing once we take ownership, which should help. And I think, well, I don't think, but I know that the Edgewood owners will do some repairs on some of the cracks that are visible before they turn it over. I think that was part of the building inspection report.
This is Jeff. Part of that, I don't know for sure if it would be determined to do chip sealing, but there's also a process that we've used on Heritage Road, which was called micro sealing. So the micro sealing is a little finer, a little better process, and it may be applicable on that project, but one way or the other, we would preserve the driveway, the parking lot area.
And we get a good quantity discount on those kind of processes, I think, because we do so many miles of road every year. Any other comments?
George, it's Dan, and when we went over to review the site, John Cattell, our Public Works Director, came with us on one of the trips, and he had made comment that the parking lot is not in bad shape at all.
I would agree with that. Anything else? All right, we'll roll along to the next one. Edgewood is too far away. I hear that a lot on the commentary. We did a Google Maps average drive time test that Tom Marks has described in some detail. And we found on average that it's less than a 2-minute increase for the average citizen in town. It's a 2-minute increase, less than 2 minutes to go from to Edgewood from Ballentine. So if you had a 10-minute drive to Ballentine, you've got about a 12-minute drive to Edgewood. You can check it for yourself. You can use the Google Maps app, type your address in. It takes about 30 seconds to do it, and then type the Ballentine address in, and then type the Edgewood address in a second time, and you can compare for yourself what your drive time differential would be. I've had folks actually send in comments that Edgewood was too far away, and they, as a good citizen will, they post their address in the comment section, and I on my own went into Google Maps, put in their address, and did the check between Ballentine and Edgewood, and in a couple of cases I found the Edgewood drive was actually less time, and I thought that was kind of interesting that people just assume that the drive is longer, but if you do the check, you may find it's actually not. Any comments on that? All right.
George, I think that was also part of why the region situated both the high school and Long Meadow School in the areas they did, because it really served both the Southbury community well also, not and it was close enough for the major populations where they live.
Yeah, as you say, if and as with what Tom was showing on his map, if you look at the population distribution, it's mostly on the east and southern side of the town. The people up in the Purchase, I mean, I've had a couple of comments from folks up in the Purchase that it really is too far, and for them it is. I apologize for that, and I can see that you might not be supportive of Edgewood, but the population in the Purchase is very small compared to the population on the eastern side of the town. And Jeff, that's a good comment that Jeff made about the schools probably looking at the same population issue and the distribution issue and deciding, it's not a bad place to put our high school and one of our elementary schools. Any other comments? All right, let's roll on to the next one. This one I thought was interesting, and I started seeing this comment about kids can ride their bikes to Ballentine as a reason not to make Edgewood part of our chain. I think interesting comment. I mean, I believe that was true many years ago, but I don't think in today's world, with today's traffic on our roads, that you see too many kids riding their bikes on the roads. I mean, I sometimes see like serious bikers, the people with the suits on and the helmets, and they're making time and they're working out for training for some event. But I don't see kids on the roads with bikes. Any comments on this?
George, I'll chime in really quick, because I think a related comment to this is, maybe they're not riding bikes, but the possibility of keeping it there because kids could walk there. They could walk there from the schools. We've seen some suggestions about turning Ballentine into a teen center, and I think that could be a really cool idea, right? Like, again, I would love to see what another task force who looks at like adaptive reuse for that facility, if we move to Edgewood, what they could do with that space. But if you're looking at facilities within walking distance for teens in this town, I would actually suggest to you that Edgewood is closer walking distance for teens after school than Ballentine is to Rochambeau. It's right by the high school where most of the teens in town go to school. A lot of the kids at Rochambeau are not of teenage age yet. But you could walk to Edgewood from Pomprog just as easy as you could from Rochambeau down to Ballentine. And that's where the majority of teens in town are located after school. So I appreciate the sentiment. And I would love to see whatever facility we end up going with. I'd love to see it used that way as a place within walking distance for a teen population. But I'd suggest that the case is just as strong, if not stronger, of high schoolers walking to Edgewood than it would be for middle schoolers walking to Ballentine.
Anyone else have anything on this?
George, if I might, Michael's here. I think we need to acknowledge that, yes, there will be some people in Southbury where it will take more time to get to Edgewood than it will to get to Ballentine, more than 2 minutes. And then also there's some people where it will take significantly less time in the absolute. But on average, it'll take a little less than 2 minutes longer. So that's what averages are, and that's what the distribution of time. Some will take longer, some will take less. On average, it's 2 minutes more. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, well, one question that's come up from a couple of people is the pool heaters. The owners of Edgewood will replace the pool heaters, so you can rest your mind on that. They do need replacement. I've seen them. They're still operating, but they're not. They don't have too many more years left. But that's something the owners of Edgewood have agreed to do without any argument. Any comments on that? Okay, the next question is how long will the public, it's a typo in there, but how long will the public comment period be open? I haven't set a final closing date for that, but we will keep it open for all relevant information until the BOS makes its decisions. We'll close public comments slightly before that happens and release all the comments at some point. But I don't have a specific date for that yet. Anybody have a thought on this from the group? So far, we've had about 200 comments, so keep them coming. We're trying to answer them all. In some cases, it's not going to be possible because we've had one person in particular submitted about 35 questions, but within each question, there were multiple questions embedded. So it was like 100 questions, and I realistically we can't do that. Sorry. We'll make an attempt to answer some of them, but I don't think we're going to get to all of them. I think that's it. Is there any? I don't think there's any other. Couple of questions though that weren't on the list that I'll throw out there just for. I didn't add them to the list, but they've come up a couple of times, and one of them is a fear that the small gym facility, the 800 square foot gym facility at Edgewood would be competing with some of the health clubs in town like Catalyst and the Heritage Village and Planet Fitness, and there's probably others that I don't know of. And taking business away from these private establishments. My comment there is that that's not going to happen. If anyone takes a look at that gym in Edgewood, it's a nice facility, but it's small. You're not going to get a lot of people in there, before they start banging into each other. It does have a nice range of equipment. It's not badly equipped, but it is not built to compete with Planet Fitness. I mean, it's just, or Catalyst. I mean, it's just not that sort of thing. It's a nice augmented feature that, say, a family goes to the pool and, the kids are swimming and mom's watching the kids and dad wants to get away and do something. He can maybe go up to the workout area and get a quick workout in. It's not a competition for the established gymnasiums in town or fitness centers. Any comments on that?
George, I just want to say, I think you did pretty well tonight. 9:30 is a long ways away yet, and I think you've completed most of the question and answers here on what this presentation was for. And I think we're running out of numbers of things to come up with on the question and answer side. It's pretty much been thoroughly vetted out here.
Yeah, I think you're right. Go ahead.
This is Tom Marks, and we've actually had 2 or 3 questions that have come in that I think are touching on new ground that we might not have addressed, but we've all discussed as a group. So if you don't mind me kind of freelancing there, I might ask, someone had just raised the point, concerned about insurance liability, and have we looked at insurances? Dan, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know that you have, and we were happy with the results. Do you mind sharing?
Sure, Tom. I had a meeting with Kerma, our insurance carrier, earlier about when we first started this process and went over everything with Edgewood, the facilities and what's there. And they had told me that there would be no increase to our insurance line based upon what's there.
It's Michael's. If I remember correctly, Dan, you told me further that there would be no increase over the cost of what it now costs to insure Ballentine.
That's correct, John. That's correct. It would be no increase to what we are paying currently to insure Ballentine.
Which we calculated out at about $5,000. Currently, it costs over $11,000 to insure Edgewood. So the cost to insure the property through the town's mutual fund company will be a little less than half of what it now costs in Edgewood.
Right.
What
Thank you.
number did we have in the profit loss? Did we use the current Edgewood at 11, or did we use the 5 that Kermit gives?
We used the
We
current
changed it.
Edgewood.
We
We
cha-
used the,
I think, Dan, in the initial one, the one that's up there now, we used Edgewood. I think in a further analysis, which we've done, because we've certainly done more than one, we changed it to the 5,000. So the one that we're using in this presentation that went to the Board of Finance, we're using 11. But in another iteration that shows the property is probably even more profitable, we used 5,000.
That's correct, John. I wanted to keep it consistent with the Board of Finance meeting in case people would go back and check it.
And that's the right way to do it in the process so far. There are so many potential iterations of what the management process might be, what the programs might be, what the P&L might look like, what the revenue structure might look like. The first one Dan did was very conservative and came up with the result we're showing.
Perfect. If I could pivot to another question that came in earlier this morning, there might be some confusion, so I think most people understand, but just to clarify, this morning someone asked, why is Middlebury selling the complex, and why can't we just use it the way Middlebury residents use it currently? So if there's anyone else that might be confused, I think we should just clarify that Edgewood is currently privately owned and is not owned by the town of Middlebury. So this would be a purchase with a private person, and it is not a town facility for Middlebury residents currently. So at least one person had that question. I think we should clarify.
Middlebury residents pay the same as anyone else. They don't get any preferential treatment. The family fee right now for a summer is $1,100, and everybody pays that, whether they're in Southbury or Middlebury.
Yeah. We had another question. This is from a few days ago, and we've touched on it in a prior presentation, but I think we could reiterate it here. Someone had asked, why was the question of not having an adult swimming pool, why has that not been addressed? So forget either Ballentine or Edgewood, what if we just don't have any pool? And we haven't had a lot of comments like that. However, I would say we've had a lot of support for a public pool. The Southbury swim programs, we've heard your voices clearly. We also, I think, would want to point out that, and we mentioned this earlier, the strategic plan for the town offers guidance for the governance of the town. And one of our 6 pillars of that strategic plan is improving recreational and cultural opportunities. So there's only 6 things that the strategic plan asks the town to consider in the governance of the town. And if one of them is recreational opportunities, it would not be, it'd be a dereliction of duty, I think, to remove that amenity and not replace it. So I believe that's why Jeff has been, in part, and the Board of Selectmen promoting this project, looking into replacement.
Yeah. Hey, and Tom, I'll pull up a little bit on that. So even though a few people have also, and we addressed this earlier, suggested, well, why don't we just ask people to go to Newtown, to the Newtown Community Center, and there's a variety of reasons why we've addressed that, why we think that's not as good an option, because first of all, it's an indoor facility, not an outdoor facility. But more than that, it's been kind of even an eye-opener to me about how much we use the Ballentine pool for things besides membership, right? In terms of the various, I mean, swimming has been a big part of Southbury culture, one of the, I think, for quite a while. And it's just been kind of really even an eye-opener for me. I knew that kind of, but it's been really an eye-opener about how many people are using the Ballentine pool and are part of the Southbury swimming tradition.
Yeah.
And Tom, it's Dan. I would also recommend everyone please go to the website and review Maria Papiro's letter that we received today. I think she lays it out very nicely, the importance of having a swim program in Southbury.
Lucy Sutter also submitted a nice letter. Those are number 14 and 15 on the list. They're both very compelling reads. Anyone who thinks that we really should just abandon Southbury swimming options, I think, should read those letters before they lock in on that conclusion. There's interesting I call them subcultures in town. We have the Boy Scouts. I don't know much about the Girl Scout programs, but I know there's some Boy Scout troops in town where over half of the boys that enter into it end up getting Eagle Scout certification. I mean, that's amazing to me that they're so dedicated to their being a scout that they go all that way and do all that work, because it's a lot of work. And swimming is similar. I mean, most people in town don't use the pools, but there's a subculture that makes it, their life revolves around swimming, and it to them, it's extremely important. So I think to take that away from so many of the people in town that really love that part of their lives, I think would be unfortunate.
Hey, George, it's Dan. I would also add that we have a very strong softball program as well. And we got a
Obviously,
very
yeah.
strong response when it was suggested we take away part of the softball fields to build a community center.
I think if we did that, Chatfields would sell out of pitchforks pretty quick. So
George, if I could, if people are watching this and if they play it later on, and this is going to be, these meetings are going to be part of the history of Southbury. And I want to remind the citizens of Southbury that not everything in Southbury is for every individual needs or wants or desires. There's open space trails. There's open space that some people will never go use or see. Maybe some people don't go to the farmer's market, but we have a farmer's market that helps the character of the town. We have a library that is wonderful. It doesn't mean that everybody uses the library. So the idea is that we need to have a diverse number of things in town that attracts many different people from many different walks of life and what their desires. Let me just say that, I don't play baseball anymore. Does that mean I would not want a new baseball facility built? Never played lacrosse. Does that mean that we shouldn't be, looking at fields for lacrosse? So it may not be that some people will never go. They may say they'll never be going to a pool to swim, but everybody deserves a piece of what they came to be in Southbury. I've based my political view on maintaining the quality of life that the people of Southbury came here and expect. A pool of the Edgewood is an expansion and enhancement of that belief that would enhance the quality of life in Southbury. And my feeling is, by seeing that it's making no financial impact to the taxpayers, is a bonus on top of it. So I just want to make sure that people understand, you may not play tennis. I do not play tennis. I don't know how to play tennis. I may someday try my hand at pickleball. It may be something I enjoy. But, people have to understand, it can't be this one thing is for everybody, but it certainly is, in my opinion, an asset to the town and to the community at large.
Jeff, you mentioned pickleball. That's one thing about Edgewood, that it's already set up there. They have pickleball. They can divide the tennis courts so that pickleball can be played on the tennis courts. I've never played pickleball. And maybe I never will, but it looks like an interesting game. I can see why it would be fun.
I think it's tennis for us who are not as quick as we used to be.
Well, hold on. Don't get yourself in trouble, Jeff.
I can say, if Jeff's going to play pickleball, I want to get a video of that for the town record.
I'm going to see if we can bring this in under 9, but I do want to address 2 more comments that were submitted almost back to back a couple of days ago. The first being, how much money is available to rehabilitate the Ballentine pool site once the town purchases Edgewood? And then a second comment, why isn't the cost of closing Valentine being considered into the purchase price? So I think both of these questions can be answered in the same way, which is I don't think there's any certainty that that would be the course of action, and that's why this task force believes a second task force should be formed. It's hard to budget for the rehabilitation of Ballantyne without a plan, so I think we'd be looking for this task force to develop a plan and do that due diligence and figure out what it would cost to bring that plan to life. Questions about, as if we were trying to hide something by not including demolition costs. I think we covered that last meeting, but just to be clear, Hugh, I think you told us if you did them at the same time, the bathhouse would be 40 grand to demolish and the pool would be 40 grand to demolish, give or take. But I don't think we're including that because that's not what we're recommending as the next step. I mean, there have been ideas suggesting that we somehow repurpose that bathhouse. So why would you just knock it down before you've had a chance to vet those ideas out and give them time? There have been ideas about having a second pool, or can we repurpose part of that pool to a smaller lap pool? Again, we've been told that the way the site is secured, as it currently is secured for the winter, is sufficient. There's no need to take immediate action. So this is not an attempt to keep the true cost down of closing Valentine. I think we just don't know yet, and that's why we're asking for that second task force to be formed to address those types of issues.
I think the most likely use for it will end up being a splash pad, but I think that's sort of affordable as opposed to doing another pool, although there are people in town that would absolutely love to have another pool, and they don't particularly care what it would cost. They would just love to have 2 pools. And
yeah, but I mean, I think on the other side of it, George, there's a lot of people that, have responded just, especially in this time, about the cost. I think what Edgewood does is keeps the whole pool concept going and buys us time to figure out really what kind of money, we want to put into with Ballantyne over time.
that's true. Any other questions, comments? I had one comment come in recently, just like 2 minutes ago, on my phone, asking why the owners of Edgewood are willing to sell it for $2 million if they spent $5.3 million to build it. And we know for a fact they did spend $5.3 million. I really don't have an answer for that. It's a personal decision that they have made, and I'll just leave it at that. It isn't because they're losing money on it. It is profitable for them now. That's not the reason. There's other factors involved. And the question comes up, I've seen it several times. And if the owners want to answer it, I'll certainly let them, but I'm not going to try to read their minds and understand what their motivations are.
George, Mike here. At a meeting with the owners, I think I was advised that they have a change of lifestyle and they plan on moving out of state for family reasons. I don't think that's a great secret. They just certainly didn't make it, and they freely shared it with us at a meeting. So, a very simple reason. To change their lifestyle and moving out of state, like a lot of other people are moving out of state.
I agree, and I was going to just say, and I was going to say it more broadly, though. I mean, everything we've seen suggests that they have little interest in sort of staying on and making, first of all, the sale of this a longer term process, and or engaging in some sort of extended process for a while with us where we extended the option and did other kinds of things to let people, use the pool while we redid Ballentine or something like that. So all our talk with them has led us to believe that they don't have a long-term commitment for the reasons probably that John is alluding to. So that trying to kind of, negotiate and extend this for a longer period of time isn't really in their game plan.
I agree. I don't think they're interested in. They want to get this deal done, and I think they will, one way or the other, whether we buy it or not. So, anything else? Any other questions have come up?
Just, George, on that note, no matter why a person wants to sell their business or sell an asset, you can think about why they would want to, what the reason is, and all this stuff. When you need to look, if you're purchasing, you need to do exactly what this group did. It doesn't matter why they want to sell it or for what reason, it's personal or a business decision. You looked at the financials over the number of years and looked at the business from that aspect. Why someone wants to sell it or why someone would want to buy it is nothing to do with what we're looking at. It's just a speculation. It's a personal matter of why someone will sell a business, and it's really nothing to do with whether the asset is worth the amount of money that they are looking for, and for whatever reason that is. It really has no bearing on why a business is being sold.
Well, it certainly has little impact on our evaluation of the property. The reasons for wanting to sell it are of interest, but not critical to the fiscal merits.
Yeah, but again, I guess what everybody assumes maybe is that somehow we're paying above market. Okay, but I think that we've tried to do as much analysis of this as a going concern. The other thing about it, though, is that that our ability to run the business might, in some ways, be better than the current owners because of the various things we bring to the table as a town. Now, few people probably believe that because they believe that the town's going to whatever they're going to do to it, but I think there's additional opportunities for us to bring more members in, perhaps than she could, and to do a certain kind of pricing level. So our opportunities and her opportunities might not be the same anyway.
I think one aspect of this pool that intrigues me that maybe some people don't understand completely, but it has a zero slope entry area, which is fabulous for seniors. And if you have a mobility issue, it's an easy way to get into a pool. Basically, it's a sloped surface on a section of the pool. It comes up to ground level, and then it gradually, on an angle, just allows you to walk slowly into the pool. As far as you want to go. And Ballentine has never had anything like that. In fact, until I saw Edgewood, I didn't know such things even existed. I was kind of like amazed. I mean, I'm not a pool person, so obviously the pool technology is something I don't know anything about. But go ahead.
Let me piggyback on that comment. It reminds me of another comment that we received, but I would just say that if there's a major failing of the current constitution of Valentine, it's that in a town that has the largest senior population, by percentage of residents in the state of Connecticut, the fact that our current pool is not senior friendly in terms of not having a sloped entry, not having working lifts, is a tough position. So to have that opportunity, and I've been very surprised. You'll see it when the comments come out. I've been very surprised by the amount of support we've received from Heritage Village residents, and we've seen comments such as being attracted. Even though I have 4 pools here in the complex, I can't wait to take my grandchildren here. Has been one thing we've seen. Or I can't wait to use the sloped entry. We've seen that comment. There was a question that had come in. We had mentioned senior friendly. Has anyone had any conversations? And Jeff, I know you've mentioned a couple times that you've had conversations about senior services and how they see this as an opportunity for those that take advantage of senior services in the town as well, right?
That's correct. The senior service director has mentioned a number of times that she feels that this would be a great opportunity for programs for seniors and in the community. So the seniors senior director is also looking forward to anticipating this being part of what she can work with.
That's phenomenal. I think that's just a phenomenal opportunity for a town like ours, which has such a special and unique makeup. It would be wrong to not have amenities like that available to our senior population.
And I'd like to add also that the cost estimates that we have received so far for the rebuild or reconstruction of Ballentine do not include that zero entry feature at all. They're not part of that. The estimates we obtained were specifically just to replicate the pool that's there. Maybe it was a slight increase in size, but it did not include the zero entry option.
We were told it couldn't work in the footprint. We were told by pool specialists that it would not work in the current footprint.
Yeah, it's difficult to do it on Valentine. Hugh, do you have any comments on that?
No, I don't at this time. Thanks.
Okay. Well, another interesting, I could keep talking about this all night, but I won't. I'll make this my last comment.
Gonna hold you to it.
Yeah. When I took Michael Gannum, Dan Colton and I took Michael Gannum on a tour, it was about a week ago. He's our Park and Recs director. One of the comments he made, and he was really excited about it, is that Edgewood has a lot of lighting. The whole place is lit, very nicely lit. There's lights on the basketball courts, the tennis courts, on the pool. I mean, you can do stuff there at night that you can't do at Ballantyne or maybe in any other park in town, except maybe I think there's a lighted field at Community House. That raises a lot of possibilities as far as what you can do for programs. I just thought I'd throw that out there because it's something that we just don't have at Ballantyne. There's no equivalent there. So.
Well, that also brings up the point that I think that we can keep this facility open longer than we keep Ballantyne open for a longer season as well. So that there's also a possibility. I mean, not just possibility. I mean, there is the possibility that we could have, that there's more opportunity for people to use, the facilities. Maybe not year round, but it's certainly a good part of the season.
Well, it is a heated pool, which Ballantyne is not and never has been. And we're estimating it'll get 4 more weeks of swimming season, 2 at the opening and 2 at the end. I suspect you could push that out further if you really wanted to. But I don't know. I'm not a pool person, really. So, all right. Well, I guess that's it, unless somebody has another question they want to throw out.
Thank you.
I guess we'll adjourn the meeting, Jeff. Are you good with that? I think you've left already.
I say we adjourn.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.
All
All right, good night. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.
Jeff,
is now